Yeah. Gosh, I mean, everyone has a different experience with this. Um, I think context is really helpful. Um, I think I think to understand what you're going through allows you to feel safe. There's a part of you that can feel safe through it. Um, Context, I mean, by context is the scriptures, Indian scriptures have created context, and they're all very beautiful. It's all towards something beautiful, something amazing, and it's seen with such reverence and devotion. So that's what I mean by context. That holds the experience. So even though you're having a wobbly time, there's that going on. There's that whole societal understanding which can hold someone through the experience. We don't have that. And I know lots of people have been through the psychiatric system whilst having this Kundalini experience, because the hallucinations, the visions can be really strong, sometimes quite dark. I want to speak about this from two angles, because there is the wellness model in Western society, and then there's the liberation model. And I think they're quite different in terms of what they both want to achieve. The wellness model wants to make a functioning human being who can realize their full potential in society, whereas the Enlightenment models are designed to help someone completely free themselves from human emotions like hate, greed, pain. These are really different frameworks we're looking at. So, I mean, I guess the question is, where do we, how someone going through that, of course, it is helpful to be able to function in society. I'm just thinking, I know now that we have psychiatrists who work on a transpersonal level, who can look at past trauma and help someone resolve those issues, which is very helpful, because ultimately I do think that the difficulty with Kundalini is your subconscious trauma coming to the surface, and you experience that emotionally. Whereas in the Buddhist model, you're supposed to feel the suffering of that. You're supposed to get terrified. You're supposed to get hurt. You're supposed to feel pain to the nth degree. And that sounds more, but it's about understanding the nature of suffering. If someone tells you, oh, that's okay, you won't go through it to the depth, and you won't get the kind of sweet release that is supposed to happen when you know what suffering is. And that, again, is a process. Whereas in our society, we wouldn't condone that in a wellness model. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I mean, I would go one step further backwards than that, in the sense that we understand the world in a binary sense, so not good, bad, and so forth, and we see pain as something that's bad, we should be feeling. And I mean, I had a very difficult initial, very powerful initial Kundalini awakening, 6 years ago, and I suppose it was very traumatic and very painful in lots of ways. I mean, I ended up being admitted to hospital for 6 weeks, and that was a nightmare. And I couldn't really function, and I thought I was dying. I actually thought I was dying. But when I look back on it, it doesn't seem like a bad experience. Honestly, it doesn't. It's just that I was perceiving it in that way. So that the way, what I'm trying to say is, we perceive pain in a certain way, but on a higher level, it's not how we perceive it. It's actually a teacher.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, I think it's part of the difficulty is part of the process. I mean, I remember my dad telling me about an experience he had when he was going through it. He was in Tokyo, and there was a guy pulling a fish out of the tank. It was still alive, a fishmonger, and slit the belly open of this fish. And my dad described how he felt the knife go through his own belly. So he felt the pain of the fish. So this sort of, people are suffering, this is sentient beings suffer. And there's a sensitivity that happens through the Kundalini process. And this is good. That's supposed to happen. To become more sensitive is a good thing. To support that would be to raise the love, raise the compassion. You don't want to dull your senses. You want to remain open, but we need more compassion, more love to cope with it.
Is there a difference between somebody who, let's say, lives in a city like London, has a spontaneous awakening? Maybe we should define that, if you can define what a spontaneous awakening is, compared to your traditional Buddhist or Hindu initiate who would have had a guru giving Shaktipat. What is, in your opinion, because it's just an opinion now, I guess, what do you think is happening and why is it happening and what's the difference?
Gosh. I think it's always been the same since time began. I think it's just society's reflection of it. I think what people are experiencing now is when they have Kundalini awakenings and the insights that they experience, it's ancient. It's an ancient force. It's like people have experiences of the creation. You know, this is within the tantric traditions, this is a force that created all things in the universe. This is not even beyond the universe. This is and this is what you experience when you go through it. And I think no matter what civilization or society you're in, the experience will be the same. Maybe some of the psychological apparitions will be a reflection of what culture you come from, what religion you are, or what your makeup, what your experiences are as a human. But you break that down, though. This is obviously there's no way to prove this or study this or explore this, but this is my hunch. As far as I do feel like as a society, though, when I look on the internet for various healing modalities, you look around and it's incredible what's available now regarding dealing with trauma, healing methods, psychology, our understanding of psychology, our openness to transcendental consciousness. It's the way science and physics explores the quantum consciousness. All of this stuff we're starting to create frameworks in all different fields for this kind of mind expansion process, which 20 years ago wouldn't have been the case. You go to a doctor, psychiatrist, and you start talking about some of your experiences, they wouldn't really know how to place it. Whereas now it's like, oh yeah, that's not
sure, to be honest. And I think psychiatric services, the mental health services still have a very materialistic framework, very material,
right?
And they can't. It's very, very rare for these experiences to be grasped. They tend to be pathologized,
right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. How long ago was it when you went through this?
No, 6 years. But I'm involved with a group called Spiritual Crisis Network, and we're supporting people the whole time. And this is very much the case now. And modern day psychiatrists, well, my nephew's been trained in psychiatry, and it does see the body as almost like a machine. There's not even a sociological sense, let alone a spiritual one. But
that's interesting. Yeah.
So I was going to sort of go back a bit to connect to something that Samir was asking. But I wanted to ask, because a lot of people going through Kundalini, can be really quite a difficult process. I wanted to ask, in what ways if someone how can traditional models practically support people through some of the difficult parts of Kundalini? Could you say anything? Could you say something about that?
Yeah, there are practices that shape the mind and how you view oneself. There's many different practices, and traditionally they would. So, for instance, there's a text called the Vishuddhimagga, which is an old Buddhist text which the Theravadins would use in their practice, and they have discerned different psychological types, and they have described different practices for different psychological types to help appease the egoic tendencies of that particular mind, that particular person. Some people have a very greedy mind. Some people have an aversion mind, like a hateful mind. Some people have a lazy mind. Some people have an overactive mind. So all of these different states, different types of mind, will create certain hindrances when Kundalini is happening, or certain kinds of suffering, psychological suffering when Kundalini is happening. So they prescribe, it's like this is because of the plasticity of the brain, certain practices done, wholeheartedly will change the architecture of the brain, and to lessen a particular thought process, which will ease the flow of prana through the body, ease the flow of energy, Kundalini energy through the body. But fundamentally, one practice that they would prescribe to all people is metta bhavana, loving kindness, which is so important on so many levels, because what you're doing, a lot of the difficult experience is fear that arises, just fear of what's happening. Literally the ground beneath you is being ripped away. So that causes a lot of fear in people. I mean, this is just one of the experiences, I suppose, that people struggle with. And the metta bhavana, you start with loving kindness. You start with, in the early Buddhist tradition, you start with kind thoughts towards the self. May I be well, may I be happy. You make this wish for the self. Through doing that practice, you genuinely relax. So it actually, they've found it to relax that part of the brain which kicks in when you need to survive. It eases the fear. You start to feel safe. And that's really, really important when you go through this experience, is to feel safe. Now that can be hard if it's, so this is where the tantric experience explains Kundalini quite well. Sometimes the Kundalini can be going on so strong that you're acting out the behavior of a deity. For instance, in Tibet, my Tibetan professor would describe going for walks in the hills with people, and they would get deity possession, and then they snarl and do the mudra, but then it'd pass and it'd be normal and they'd be fine and they'd crack on with their walk, and that was normal. That's not really accepted in our culture to do that when you're at the pub. So I don't know. I think that's having good friends, finding, like what you guys provide, a network of people who understand, who can contain or support people through those experiences, where you can go somewhere safe, beautiful, natural, to let those experience out, where you're not in the supermarket, maybe, where you might trigger people to react, which in turn will cause problems for yourself. So yeah, it's about creating a safe space for yourself, a safe network, safe feeling in the brain, first and foremost, I would say. And I think that that's certainly the system that the early Buddhists, also in Vajrayana Buddhism, they would prostrate to a deity. So before you go into any kind of tummo practice, which is the Kundalini practices, you do thousands and thousands and thousands of prostrations. So you are bowing down to the deity, and through doing that, you are lessening yourself. Yourself is becoming less important. The deity is becoming more important. So when Kundalini ravages through your body, you're worshipping the deity. There's no you anymore. So these traditions would hold those experiences in different ways, I suppose.